They were also taught religious songs and hymns and the sacred dances, because this knowledge was necessary to the correct performance of the sacrifices and festivals of the city. We skip a bit. A man had no chance to choose his belief. He must believe and submit to the religion of the city. He could hate and despise the gods of the neighboring city, not his own though. And we skip down just a bit here. Socrates was put to death for this crime. If that hadn't been on your mind yet, there it is. Liberty of thought in regards to the state of religion was absolutely unknown among the ancients. Men had to conform to all the rules of worship, figure in all the processions, and take part in the sacred repasts. Athenian legislation punished those by a fine who failed religiously to celebrate a national festival. The ancients, therefore, knew neither liberty in private life, liberty in education, nor religious liberty. The human person counted for very little against that holy and almost divine authority which was called the country or the state. Now I pause for a moment here and say that this author's obviously got an agenda, an anti-classicist or something like that. He does point out interesting things, doesn't he? He does point out the hegemonic power of the state. But then what's more interesting is to take pause and realize that this is the freest, most liberal society in the history of the planet up to that point. So, as bad as it is, and let's continue to read about how bad it was, this author's got an agenda, so he's giving us the evidence that fits his agenda. The state had not only, as we have in our modern societies, a right to administer justice to the citizens, it could strike when one was not guilty, and simply for its own interests. Now, there is a term called ostracism, and it's going to talk about ostracism at this point. And ostracism was the practice of once a year that people could vote to eject somebody from the city. They would simply kick them out. It was their way of sending a dangerous person away if they thought someone was getting too big for their britches. And the word ostracism comes from the word for a broken shard of pottery called an ostraca. And what they would do is people would scratch the name of the individual they didn't like and wanted ejected from the city, scratch it onto a broken shard of pottery, and they'd all put those in, and then they were sorted out. And in some instances, there were these buttons manufactured. Buttons were manufactured with the name of the man that they wanted to put out. And so they just hand these out. Put this in for yours. Put this in for yours. So at any rate, ostracism then is the name of choosing that individual who you are going to now put outside of society. They protected themselves in this way from powerful individuals. This author presents it as a clear violation of the liberties of that individual. But supposedly the Athenians only did it against people they thought they were going to be violated by. There's a gentleman named Aristides. Assuredly he had committed no crime and was not even suspected. But the city had the right to drive him from its territory for the simple reason that he had acquired by his virtues too much influence and might become dangerous, if he desired to be. This was called ostracism. This institution was not peculiar to Athens. It was found in Argos, at Megara, at Syracuse, and we may believe that it existed in all the Greek cities. He cites Aristotle's Politics, Book 8. Ostracism was not a chastisement. It was a precaution which the city took against a citizen whom it suspected of having the power to injure it at any time. Now, the city didn't take that action. The people took that action, and they were the city in the city-state. Like I said, this guy's got an agenda. At Athens, a man could be put on trial and condemned for incivism. I-N-C-I-V-I-S-M. What is that? Incivism? That is to say, for the want of affection towards the state. A man's life was guaranteed by nothing so soon as the interest of the state was at stake. Rome made a law by which it was permitted to kill any man who might have the intention of becoming king. That's kind of what ostracism was, but in Rome they were like, if he wants to become king, we'll kill him. It is a singular error, therefore, among all human errors, to believe that in the ancient cities men enjoyed liberty. They had not even the idea of it. They did not believe that there could exist any right as against the city and its gods. The government was called by turns monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, but none of these revolutions gave man true liberty, individual liberty. He's got an agenda, he's proving his case, but like I say, we have to remember, Greece was the best civilization anywhere ever up to that point, and for a long time after that. So now we're interested in hearing about revolutions. Talk about the revolutions where the aristocracies had taken over power from the kings, and then the tyrants took over power from the aristocracies. And in these revolutions, quote, "We cannot state at what period these revolutions commenced. All that is certain is that, from the 7th century before our era, in the 600s BC, this social organization was almost everywhere discussed and attacked. It struggled for several centuries in the midst of perpetual contests, and finally disappeared. The causes of its destruction may be reduced to two. One was the change which took place in the course of time in ideas, resulting from the natural development of the human mind. The advancement of ideas? Yeah, okay, something like that. I'll give him half a point of credit. The other was a class of men who found themselves placed outside of this organization and who suffered from it. These men had an interest in destroying it and made war upon it continually." Not everybody in history understands everything so well as conspiracy theorists allege. Okay? Just because people are harmed by an institution doesn't mean they know that they are harmed by it. And just because they are harmed by it doesn't mean they will fight against it. Okay? Just because people are not helped by an institution doesn't mean they won't assist it. Okay? There are oppressed women in the Muslim world who believe that women should always wear the veil. They believe it. There were women in America who thought that giving the vote to women was stupid. Why would you give women the vote, said a woman. You know? So, throughout history you can find that. And the people who brought down the system weren't necessarily people who believed it was a bad system. That's all I'm saying. Continuing. When therefore the beliefs on which this social regime was founded became weakened, the interests of the majority of men were at war with it, and the system fell. No city escaped this law of transformation. Sparta no more than Athens, Rome no more than Greece. The men of Greece and those of Italy had originally the same beliefs, and the same series of institutions was developed among both, and all these cities passed through similar revolutions. Interesting bit about the revolutions, and that's about all we need from him there. We skip now to page 235. The kings wished to be powerful, and the patres wished that they should not be. The underclass, the people under the kings. A struggle then commenced in all the cities between the aristocracy and the kings. Everywhere the issue of the struggle was the same. Royalty was vanquished, but we must not forget that this primitive royalty was sacred. Here's an important point. We glimpsed a bit of this earlier. The king, quote, was the man who pronounced the prayers, offered the sacrifice, who had, in fine, by hereditary right, the power to call down upon the city the protection of the gods. Men could not think, therefore, of doing away with the king. One was necessary to their religion, a king. A king was necessary to the safety of the city. So we see in all the cities whose history is known to us that they did not at first touch the religious authority of the king, and contented themselves with taking away his political power. As he says, in all the cities known to us, they stripped the king of his political power, left him with his religious power, his ceremonial power. Continuing, we skip a bit. It might be taken from the kings without imperiling religion, because we can take their political power, and the Greeks, that's the essence of the revolution.